ideology of long-term gradual change, and out there in the real world of Islamist politics, they fight with each other all the time over the course of the 2000s. There was a big argument that took place over the 2000s about how to approach and how to deal with the Muslim Brotherhood. And what's interesting is that once again, the Bush administration and the Obama administration were less far apart than one might think. Many people in the Bush administration understood that because of the size and weight of the Muslim Brotherhood in places like Egypt or Jordan or Morocco, if you were going to have meaningful democracy in those countries, which is something that the Bush administration, at least parts of it, I think, believed in quite strongly, then groups like the Muslim Brotherhood needed to be included. They needed to be given the opportunity to participate in elections. Obama continued that, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. But I think that this debate between lumpers and splitters, part of it was within insurgencies, but part of it was between the nonviolent and the violent. And how you think about the Muslim Brotherhood then became one of the most important debates which took place over the course of the 2000s. Do you want to basically encourage the Muslim Brotherhood to normalize, to take part in politics and have that be a key part of democracy in those countries? Or do you want to view them as essentially a radical movement which must be repressed, crushed, and defeated? And that debate went all the way through the 2000s. And I would say that the Bush administration didn't really resolve it. The Obama administration came down very strongly on the side of participation and of treating them as a part of these Arab societies. So that was the debate circa the 2000s. And hopefully from this debate you can see how many similarities there are between that debate and what we're going about right now. But the second really important point that I want to make now, transitioning to the third part of my talk, is that Islamism itself has changed enormously since 2011. And that many of the debates that we have are still rooted in, I would say, obsolete notions of what Islamism is and how it operates. Many of the things which I said a few moments ago, I think very effectively captured what was going on in the Arab world, in the Islamic movement before 2011. But 2011 has been profoundly disruptive on all of these fronts. And things which we once knew, I think correctly, about the Muslim Brotherhood or about Al-Qaeda or about other Islamist groups aren't true anymore. Not because the theories were wrong, but because the world has changed. And let me just touch quickly on a few of them. Probably the most important change in terms of the nonviolent movements has been Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood. After the revolution in 2011, the United States tried to help broker a democratic transition in Egypt. And one of my disagreements with that about Obama is that I think many of the disruptive effects that he described, they came from within the region. In other words, that Obama was responding to the Arab Spring, the Arab uprisings, the evolution of the war in Syria. So that's an important part of the context. Obama did not decide he was going to put the Muslim Brotherhood in power. He responded to a popular upheaval which overthrew President Mubarak and then led to an attempt at democratic transition. In that democratic transition, the United States took the position that the Muslim Brotherhood should be allowed to participate and that if they won, they should be allowed to govern. And this was a revolutionary step. Even the Bush administration, which had been in favor of the Brotherhood participating, was not in favor of the Brotherhood winning. And so they were willing, and they pushed Mubarak quite hard in 2005 to let the Brotherhood participate in elections, and they did very well. But when Hamas won elections in the Palestinian elections in 2006, they rejected those and refused to work with the elected government. In other words, the difference between Bush and Obama was not about Islamist participation in elections, it was about accepting a victory. And Obama decided he was going to accept a victory, and that had a lot of ramifications. The really short version of it is that the Muslim Brotherhood won elections, both parliamentary and presidential. They governed horribly, alienated a significant portion of the Egyptian public, and set in motion a chain of events which led to a military coup in July of 2013, which ended the transition to democracy. In that period since July 2013, the Muslim Brotherhood inside of Egypt has been absolutely shattered. I mean, it doesn't exist in the form that it used to have. It used to have a large public presence, Now it doesn't. All their offices have been shuttered. Some 30,000 members are in jail. The rest are in exile. And there was, most brutally, there was the August 6th massacre of about 1,000 Islamist demonstrators in Cairo in August of 2013. What this means is that the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, which is the most important of all the Muslim Brotherhood branches, doesn't exist anymore. It's been absolutely shattered. It no longer has a central organization capable of doing anything. They can't participate in electoral politics because they've been deemed a terrorist organization by the Egyptian military government. And they are moving in directions that, if some of them, again, this is not, the organization doesn't exist anymore, but some of their members are moving in the direction of insurgency and are embracing violence. They're rethinking their ideas about gradual change. They are rethinking their ideas about democratic participation. And from their point of view, the fact that their democratically elected leaders were overthrown in a military coup suggests that democracy isn't ready for them, rather than them not being ready for democracy. But the point of all this is simply to say that I used to talk, and many scholars and policy analysts used to think about the Muslim Brotherhood being a firewall against Al-Qaeda and offering a path towards democratic, normal politics. That's gone. That is over. That debate is now irrelevant because you don't have the possibility of democratic politics, and the Muslim Brotherhood isn't what it used to be, at least in Egypt. Elsewhere, though, people often miss, Islamist parties are doing great. They won elections in Tunisia and governed for a while and then voluntarily stepped down from power and are currently part of the ruling coalition. In Morocco, an Islamist is the prime minister and has been for the last 3 years. In Kuwait and in Jordan, they're participating in elections again. In Syria and in Yemen, they're key parts of US-backed military coalitions. For a long time, they were part of the Iraqi government. In other words, outside of Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood is still a viable and vital part of democratic politics, but there isn't much, really, to be perfectly honest, by way of democratic politics in the Arab world anymore. So that part of the debate is largely irrelevant. The other part of the debate has been totally upended by ISIS and the emergence of the Islamic State. The Islamic State, when it seized the territory in Iraq and in Syria, carved out and declared a caliphate and demonstrated its power and established itself, this was a revolutionary moment in intra-Islamist politics. What many people don't understand is that one of the primary targets of ISIS was Al-Qaeda, and that ISIS itself was an offshoot of Al-Qaeda, and it basically was a split in which one faction rejected the leadership of the traditional Al-Qaeda core, and they were basically making a bid against, within, but not against Islamist politics. Now, ISIS's rise coincided with Al-Qaeda's decline, and it seemed like this was simply moving in the direction of ISIS replacing Al-Qaeda. But over the last year or two, ISIS has suffered enormous setbacks. The campaign against ISIS has been quite successful. They're down to controlling 7% of Iraqi territory after at one time controlling 40%. Their territory is shrinking. I mean, it's probably going to collapse. At the same time, Al-Qaeda has had a resurgence. The Al-Qaeda coalition, which the rebranded coalition in Syria, is now essentially eating the entire armed opposition, and is probably strong. Al-Qaeda is probably stronger than it's been in a decade, since the height of the Iraq War, 2005-2006. So, ups and downs. To me, this is a case for splitting. Okay, now let me conclude by pointing to where Trump is now. As I said, Trump began very, very much in the lumping camp, and some of the early things like the Muslim ban, which I think was a tremendous mistake and really did have terrible consequences. And things like some of the originally there was a notion of declaring the Muslim Brotherhood to be a terrorist organization. There was talk of this radical new plan against ISIS. None of this stuff has happened. None of it has happened. That's the key. The Muslim bans were both overturned. The Muslim Brotherhood designation as a terrorist organization seems to have died on the vine. Even when President El-Sisi of Egypt came to visit last week, many of us thought that would be the rollout moment. It just didn't happen. His plan against ISIS is basically to do what Obama was doing, but take credit for it. That's fine. I mean, It's working. He actually kept the same guy, Brett McGurk, in charge of it. Very smart. And again, I agree with Matt here. There's no radical departure in this. The only thing surprising about Trump's Islam policy right now is that it didn't used to be his policy. And that he's basically ended up being far more conventional and far more normal, and I would say far more effective than anybody would have been led to expect by his campaign rhetoric. Now, this doesn't mean that this will never change. As Matt said, the team is still in formation. Many of the worst members of the early administration have been forced out. There's still some there who would like to do things very, very differently. McMaster can't stand them, and so presumably they'll be gone. But we don't know that. And what many people fear is if there is a major terrorist attack in the United States, that this will unleash the worst instincts of the administration. The things that they were not able to do initially, they will suddenly find themselves able to do. I think this is a legitimate concern because I think that the instincts and the political logic of it is very clear, and it's something that I and others are following and looking at quite carefully. But I would conclude by simply saying that despite our very real fears based on campaign rhetoric and personnel, almost none of it has actually materialized. And what Trump has ended up doing has been, to this point at least, pursuing essentially Obama's policy on almost all of these issues. And I think that's a good thing. All right, thanks.